G'day punters and welcome back to Tabs Inside 50. I'm Nick Quinn and I'm surprised as anyone, Shane Crawford. They've got us back for another season. Welcome to you.
Why wouldn't they, especially over the last 6 months while there's been no footy. The podcast is going berserk. Everyone's jumping on board and listening to some of the greats of AFL, and we've got a very special player, and former player, I should say, recently retired, but an absolute warrior, so looking forward to having a chat with him.
An absolute superstar, 302 magnificent games for the Melbourne Footy Club, 3 best and fairest. A very warm welcome to Nathan Jones.
Thanks, Quinny. Thanks, Craw. Thanks for having me.
What are your thoughts about stepping into the podcast with us two today? It must be a little bit daunting, intimidating.
I wouldn't have thought so. It should be a bit of fun, light-hearted, hopefully, and it's nice to see you both. Obviously, Quinny, I saw you not too long ago at the Super Bowl setup.
What, you went to the Super Bowl with
No,
Quinny?
well, he set me up in Melbourne. I felt like I was at the Super Bowl. It was a good party.
Yeah, right.
Monday morning, we're having a beer at 10 a.m, the perks of retirement life. And it's been a while since I've seen you, Croft, but tanned.
Tanned, yes, living up. Not that
Relaxed.
I go looking for the tan these days. I'm like trying to hide from the sun, but yes, when you live up near the sun, it's hard to get out of it. But what about Nath? He's just rocked in and he's got all the tats. I've never noticed all the tats on his leg before, Quinny, mainly because he's probably had these socks on when he was playing, but he's got some rippers there, and then he's rocking the beautiful blingy watch. Life's pretty good, hey, being a former Melbourne champion.
As a footy player, you had a lot of success. We're going to look at some of that today. Tell us about the early days. You were a sports-loving kid from day dot, and when did you start to realise, geez, I'm pretty good at this footy caper?
My parents encouraged me heaps to play a lot of different sports, but I was probably a little bit alternative in comparison to sort of the common Aussie kid. Sort of footy, cricket, basketball are probably the keys for young boys, I would have thought. But I sort of did in summer a lot of athletics, swimming. Then I got into surfing, triathlons. Funnily enough, I've gone full circle and I'm training for a triathlon right now. But yeah, it's I've sort of was on and off with that until I really committed to about probably 16, when it just became, it was too hard to juggle it. So, I did reasonably well from in the athletic swimming triathlon sort of space. I, went to nationals and state champs and stuff like that. And then trying to balance that with footy and then all of the rep footy that comes along, particularly around that 16 mark. Pre-seasons chewed into summer. And at some point I just had to make a commitment. It was about 16 that I was like, I'm going to have a crack, see how we go. Now that's I was part of the TAC Cup, Dandenong Stingrays, and pre-season sort of began, and I played 1 or 2 games as a 16-year-old in the under-18 comp, and then that was where I was made a full-on commitment to having a crack at that.
And is that where you got a few kicks and you thought, do you know what? I'm not far off if I can just dedicate myself and have it as a sole focus. And obviously you've loved, when you talk about all those sports, they're all sports that I love. You obviously love getting out and being active and testing yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Even with the triathlons, you're going to have to lose all that big, strong muscle and those biceps, and you're going to have to cut out the bench press because
I've done that. So I signed up for the Melbourne Marathon, Melbourne Ironman, half Ironman, which is 18 days from now.
Oh, gee. Okay. Well, hopefully you have been training.
I have been training a lot. And I sort of did that off the back of when I retired. I came home, COVID, 2 new babies, which took me to 4 kids. Wasn't really sure what was next. I just needed to find a bit of routine, and I was real conscious of that. If I didn't get into a bit of a groove in some capacity, I would have just really floated along and was worried about where I might end up. I just other than changing nappies and being there for the babies and stuff with my wife, I needed to find some of my own time. So I committed to setting a goal, which was the 70.3 Ironman, which that's what I started to train for. Probably been training properly for that for 15 weeks.
And a lot of footy players must struggle with that because during your career you're told what to do and when to do it, and then all of a sudden you're left to your own devices.
Yeah, well, that's all I'd ever known. and even going back further than that, that's how I was as a kid too. Like, it was eat, sleep, school, train, pretty much, and hang out with mates on a Friday or Saturday night, and then back into it again. And that was my whole life until getting drafted, and then essentially it was just like a hyper version of that, more focus, more stakes as an AFL player. So I've pretty much done that for over 20 years. So I was real conscious of when I finished, like, I'd needed to find something again, like find a purpose and find it pretty quickly, or else, from what I've seen, and Crawford know too, and guys just sort of float along, and you can be in a very different space pretty quickly if you don't find some real purpose in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome, because I think you're so right. Obviously having football as your life, and the thing is, when I finished footy, I felt like it was, I was grieving, because they'd been a part of my life. Even though I was ready to move on, I'm like, okay, I'm ready, but you feel like you're sort of grieving, and you got to park that is no longer. So having a purpose is so important. You've got to do things that you're passionate about, things that really sort of make you want to jump out of bed. It's great that you've jumped straight into
it's kind of weird.
Training
like,
for a
triathlon. A lot of
triathlon.
people say to me, like a lot of my mates, even my wife thinks I'm nuts.
But you know what? I've worked it out, because I've got 4 kids myself. And
Get out of the house.
You've got to find a way to get out of that bloody house.
Yeah, I'm just going for a ride 5 hours later.
I tell you what, my first year out of footy, apparently I've never worked so hard in my life. But I never had contracts with anyone, Channel 9 or anything like that. I just used to go, Quinny, because I tell you what, I couldn't tolerate the kids.
Better move on before we get you in trouble, Shane Crawford.
I'm always in trouble, mate.
Now, the 2005 National Draft, for mine, it is the best at the top. It was absolutely sensational. Listen to this. We had Nathan Jones go pick 12. In the top 14, these names: Mark Murphy, Dale Thomas, Josh Kennedy, Scott Pendlebury, Sean Higgins, Grant Birchall. That's as good as it gets. It was a top draft. Going into the draft, you must have been very confident you would get drafted. How did you assess yourself against these other star players that I just read out?
I had a feeling I could have gone anywhere from maybe 5 to 20.
Yep.
Like there was some interest from Collingwood at 5, but in saying that, I was pretty real about my year. I was underage, so I was only a 17-year-old at that and in that year, and I played like a lot of school footy, and I was part of the AGS, not the APS, which is like the weaker of the private school competitions, and so that cost me probably half of a TAC Cup season, I reckon. And I was probably lucky that our TAC Cup team was quite successful. We ended up playing in a curtain raiser grand final against Gippsland that year. I think it was the Sydney West Coast, the Leo Barry mark.
The first Sydney West Coast one, 2005.
And we didn't win that game, but that probably helped in some capacity. And I played Metro and stuff that year. But yeah, it was... it was a pretty strong draft. Obviously, I got to see Daisy and Pendles up close in the granny. And Daisy put on a genuine clinic. And yeah, it was I think I look back and I was pretty happy with how it all ended up. To be honest, I was a kid from Mount Eliza. I was probably pretty concerned about going into state. Real family person, and I didn't really want to leave them, so I couldn't have probably asked for a better option, considering the only closer team would have been St Kilda, as far as from Mount Eliza to Moorabbin. I lived in Mornington and drove to so we were all over the place, to be honest, in my first year, but drove from Mornington to Junction Oval pretty much for training for the first 2 years of my career.
And you entered a team that was going along very nicely, and you made your debut in round 17 against the Western Bulldogs. What can you recall about that game? And basically, you never looked back.
Yeah, Neil Danaher really made me earn it, that's for sure. But in saying that, I got a heap of great experience playing in the VFL for the first 16-odd games. And they were a really strong team as well. So at the time, we were aligned with the Sandringham Zebras, and they'd won 3 flags in a row, I'm pretty sure. And So, yeah, we were on top of the ladder, and there was a good bunch of guys down there as well. And then I was lucky enough to get my chance. You know, we had a real strong midfield, so for me to try and crack in, I think we finished 5th that year. But yeah, I got to play the last 6 games of that season. And my debut game, which was that Doggies game, was Adam Uze's 250th game. So it was a pretty cool day. Overshadowed a little bit by him, obviously. But no, we are. Funnily enough, I remember my first opponent was Daniel Cross. Then come the end of his career, he's my teammate. Then he's our rehab coach. So there's some funny links there, but that was good. I remember it very clearly.
And what can you remember? Your first game, you know, what was
what
were the feelings
I think
like?
I got my first
Did you get a touch?
First touch was on the wing.
Out by yourself. How'd you get some space by yourself on the wing?
I can't recall that, but I think I took an easy little lead-up mark. Was my first kick. And then I was frazzled, like there's so much going on. Even when you watch the vision, I'm like looking around, like trying to make a decision. But
Yes.
I felt more comfortable, 5 or 10 minutes later, and yeah, that was a fun day. It was probably not until the second week that I really felt comfortable. Like the first week was just so much energy and so much nerves, and just wanted to get it over and done with. Whereas round 2, I felt a heap more comfortable. Kicked my first goal, and yeah, it's much more felt much more natural.
And you never look back. They didn't give you your spot to anyone else, which was superb. And the D's were pretty good that season. You went on, you made the final, you had that big win over St Kilda at the MCG. Then you went over and played against Freo in a final. And then you came back and played in the Premiership in the VFL. So it was a great first season.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what I mean. That last like 2 or 3 months was an awesome experience. And I was sort of like pinching myself. I was a mad Saints fan when I was a kid, so that first final was pretty cool. Like I remember sort of lining up on Robert Harvey, and there was a bit of stuff in the media that week, and like I think there was some random, I can't remember what the random connection was, but anyway.
He was down that way, wasn't he? He was a Frankston.
Yeah.
Sort of
I think Seaford maybe.
Seaford.
Yeah.
Way. And your brother barracked for the Swans as well.
The Saints.
The Saints as
yeah,
well.
yeah. No, our whole
Before going to
family
the
was
Swans,
like mad Saints fans. That's funny. Now Zach actually plays there. But yeah, and then obviously, as you said, we went over to Freo. That was a bit of a reality check. We thought we were in with a shot, but after half time, they sort of blew us away, won by 40 plus points. And then just like go and have a few beers with the boys, and then we fly back home. I think I went to the AFL Mad Monday. Then I stopped drinking. Then that Sunday, I reckon it was, we played in the Premiership with the Zebras, that was a good day out. Optus, we played Geelong. There was a bit of a rivalry back then, and I think I had 25 and kicked no goals 5. Yeah, it's a good day though.
Well, at least you got the footy. At least you got the Premiership, which is really important. But what an unbelievable grounding, really. The second half of the season, then you're thrown into AFL finals. And Melbourne being bullies in finals back then against St Kilda and Fremantle, hey? Wasn't that a great year, having all those teams in the finals, Quinny? So that's quite nice. But what was it about the Saints when you were growing up as a kid? Why did you love the Saints? Was it guys like Robert Harvey?
Yeah. Old mum, it sort of came from mum and dad. They were just like, they've always been passionate fans, and that sort of rubbed off on us kids. I still remember going to games. I remember going when they going to the final training session before the Saints played in the grand final against Adelaide that year. I think it was in 97. I remember we'd go down to Moorabbin to train, and they'd kick the footies over the fence. Good Macca's Sharons with some
You'd run off with them, would you?
Pinch them, run them back to the car. Every time we went there, but I remember going to that session, and they had there was 15,000 people there. I reckon everyone jumped the fence, kicking the footy after, and no, it was just part of our family. And the connection for me was I just loved Robert Harvey. He was my favourite player. Wanted to emulate him in every possible way. Most of my junior career I wore 35, and
And then you're playing on him in a final.
Yeah, which was I was just pinching myself really.
And he doesn't stop moving either, too.
And at that stage, he would have been 36 or something.
Yeah.
And I'm 18, and thinking, this is crazy, but yeah.
Well, he would have been pretty proud of you because at the top of the show, Crawf, you described Nathan as a warrior. And I'll let you play this game, Crawf. Over the next 10 seasons, after Nathan cracked into the team and he didn't miss a game from that point on that season, the next 10 seasons, guess how many games Nathan didn't play in for the Melbourne Footy Club?
Didn't play in? Oh, he surely didn't play in all of them. No way.
5 games.
He missed 5 games.
21, 21, 20, 22, 22, 21, 22, 22, 22, 22. Obviously, you had some luck with injury along the way, but you must have been very tough both physically and mentally because I've got no doubt there are a lot of times where you probably weren't 100%, but you got yourself up there and you represented your club with such pride.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what the 5 were that I missed. I reckon I got dropped a couple of times.
Maybe a suspension.
No, I've
Did we
never
get
been suspended.
Really?
Never been suspended.
You were such a thug out there.
Thug. That's rough. I reckon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I reckon I got dropped a couple of times. I'm not sure why.
I think with Nathan's mentality, I'm sure there was plenty of games that you played carrying many injury, just finding a way to get through there. I can even remember if you had a calf issue at one stage, which it's a no-go zone. There's no way you play. But then, yep, sure enough, he's out there running around. So I'm sure there's plenty of injuries, and that's, to play those games, you just don't feel good. There's always something going on, and no doubt there was things definitely kept under the carpet.
I remember Cameron Bruce, when I was pretty young there, I'd always ask him, he's like, I've never been 100%. Like, not after your bloody second or third year, you're not 100%. I just reckon I always thought about that. Like, if there's a few things you could tick off in training, like, I'm never going to feel $1 million. Like, you wouldn't play if you were trying to do that, There's always going to be a little knock or a niggle, little strain. But, yeah, unless it's real. Well, I struggled later in my career with that because, you become half paranoid, particularly when you do hammies and proper calves, not just like a little nick. But, anyway, I think you're either, I reckon you're either mentally able to do that or some aren't. Other guys I've seen that unless they feel an absolute $1 million, they won't play. But anyway. Is what it is.
Each to their own.
Yeah. So when I think of Nathan Jones and the Melbourne Football Club, there was a tough period there where there was all sorts of things going off field. Everyone was
probably that 10-year period you just read out was the tough period.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's so much respect there for the way that you went about it because I reckon anyone can get a kick at a good team. You can just slot in, find your spot, as Quinny used to do, stay out wide. The ball, we'll kick it to you, Quinny, and bring you into the game, that type of stuff. But Nath Jones was in the best couple of players every week. He was in the middle of the ground. He's winning the footy, doing all the hard stuff, trying to keep the score board respectable, never giving in, that fighting spirit. And I think every football lover and every opposition player just knew that, there's one guy in that team that was going to stand up, and that was Nathan Jones. And that's, I don't know what your goals were when you started your career is I want to play 100 games or I want to be a consistent player. I don't know what they were, but, whatever they were, mate, you would have ticked them off in a big way because you were the spirit of that football club and you held them together when there wasn't much holding that football club together. So, that's something you should be unbelievably proud of what you've done. And not only that, you've helped them come through the other side to be the team that they are today.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
So what were your goals when you started out, and how tough was it fronting up each week? Because you're just some losses are coming your way, but you got to front up and you got to charge in.
Yeah, I think early days, after, what was it, Danners left midway through my second year, and then we got Dean Bailey in as coach, and you sort of sold that the vision of what's next, and along with everyone else, really believed in that, and we actually were on our way in a way. I think at one stage we sat 10th, and it might have been just before we got smashed by Geelong in that 186 point loss. But yeah, I don't know. I think initially when I first started, it was, I probably reflected on a lot from what my parents told me. It was probably pretty ingrained about, not taking the easy option, and, no matter how hard it gets, you just dig in and you always give your best and those kind of things. And my career probably, now that I look back, I wouldn't have scripted it that way, but ultimately, a lot of the decisions came down to how I was feeling, I guess, morally about the situation. And people always ask me, what could you have gone to another club and all those kind of things in some of those really dark periods. And I probably could have, but I never really went down that track, because I was like, well, if I jump ship now, I'm going against everything I've ever really believed in, and that's why it's like kind of like the link now with the triathlon stuff and wanting to do like some of that extreme training thing, because it's just like, I don't know, it's an innate thing that I just want to see how far I can push myself. So there was an element early days was like, well, no matter how hard this gets, I'm not going to give up kind of thing. And then, as that period became more prolonged, my role sort of evolved, and I became a leader of the club. And then it became not so much about me and the test of me willing to sort of endure that difficult period, but can I help and inspire other people to change the direction of where we're going? So there was like a bit of an evolution of, how I originally took on the challenges and the struggles, to then, I felt almost a sense of responsibility, because, after, 10 years of pretty much struggling as a team and as a club, it got to a point where I was like, well, if I was to leave, like, who's ever gonna like put a stake in the ground and be like, come on, like let's inspire some change kind of thing. So, fast forward to the period where Ruzi became coach, and then we, got the succession going with Goody and those kind of things. At that point in time, I signed a long-term deal, and I was co-captain of the club, and I felt a sense of responsibility both within myself and then to the wider team and the playing group to I guess stand up and say I'm willing to put myself on the line, like let's all go and let's sort of push for change. And ultimately now we see it out the other side. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of it from a playing standpoint, but over the last probably 5 or 6 years, it's I put a lot of time and effort into hoping, or I guess developing and being a part of shaping the direction and culture that we tried to build.
Yeah, and I don't think that's lost. I think everyone in the football world knows that. Your fingerprints are all over it. You guys like Max Gawn, who are Quinny's mate, who rocks into the football club and doesn't know how to be a professional and drives along the freeway having a dart before trade. So at some stage they need people like you to go, hey mate, if we're going to go anywhere, this is what needs to happen. And to see him come out the other side, the transformation's unbelievable. And yes, they've got to have the drive inside them, but they've got to have people in front of them that they can actually watch and learn from and then grow from. So your fingerprints are all over that. And yeah, it was unbelievable, really. When you think about the grand final, it was amazing. And the thing that I loved is like they wanted. I know you had to go back home. That's what happens when you're having children, and you couldn't script this stuff really.
I couldn't have scripted the last 12 months. That's for sure.
And that's the football world, and that's been your journey at the Melbourne Football Club. Like, because you see every now and then you have a nice win, and you think, oh, we're starting to turn, and then all of a sudden, whether it be injuries or people get ahead of themselves, or you've got the wrong routine, and and then you fall back.
Yeah.
But you see those little bits of light every now and then, and it just peps you along. But and the thing is, what I loved, Quinny, about Melbourne winning this year, all they wanted to do was reconnect with Nath in some way. They wanted to get him on the phone. They wanted to, make sure that he didn't forget that, hey, mate, you actually drove a lot of this. You've been the key ingredient to us changing and moving forward. So that I really enjoyed. It's just one of those things that turned out that way, but without Nathan driving along, it wouldn't be the situation that it is today.
There's absolutely no doubt about that, and I will touch on 2021 in just a sec. Before we get that far ahead, though, I do want to go back to 2006 because you're playing a team that's 2 wins outside the grand final, and it did look on paper a really nice combination of some good experienced players and some really good young players coming through. So the question, you look back, where did it go wrong, and what do you think the club didn't do at the time that they could have done differently to ensure that the bottom out never happened?
Yeah, well, you're stretching my memory here. You remember, I'm only 19 at the time. I wasn't taking much in back then.
No.
Like, I don't know what happened at the start of was it 2007? I don't really know. Like, all I can really remember from that year, when I think about it, was we played Essendon in Danners' last game. I remember playing on James Hird. These are just the random things I remember from that year. My wife actually went overseas. Well, she was my girlfriend at the time. Went overseas for that year.
It said, Buggy and Nathan, I'm out of here. This footy stuff's too much pressure.
And I think I finished that season with the second rising star and second in our best and fairest to James McDonald, but we had a terrible season. And then from that point on, I don't really recall too much more of that year, other than Bomber Riley took over as the interim. Dean Bailey got appointed as coach, and then we sort of started a new journey. And I guess my experience now would suggest that looking at that period, probably over 5 years, so Bailey into Neild, I would have liked us to have maintained some of our more experienced players. I think we moved, my opinion is, I think maybe we moved some of them on too quickly and threw too much responsibility on younger, less experienced, up-and-coming players, rather than having guys like, Cameron Bruce, who went to Hawthorn, James McDonald, who went to GWS, Brent Maloney, who went to Brisbane, Mark Jamar left, like these kind of guys around. Brad Miller left. Maybe not necessarily they're going to give us a huge amount on field, but it's what you were saying before, Croft, like just setting the standard and the tone for training and behaviours and expectations, and they drive like a level. Greeny's another one, and there's an element of selflessness involved in those senior guys, and whether they're willing to stick around, but just that option to be there and be a part of bringing through that next generation. And I think you cut them off at the knees and they finish their careers. A lot of responsibility goes on to young shoulders that, one, are trying to figure their way out in the game from a playing standpoint and a standard standpoint, and even just just how to train and what to do. Now they've got an added expectation of winning and these kind of things, without even really figuring out what it takes to perform individually. And then I felt like we were just in a real bind at that point. It sort of compounded over a few years, and then ultimately, you couple that with a poor culture where I think we sort of lacked foundations at the bottom and sort of leadership from the top, and that filtered its way through the club. And we went through a really difficult. Probably the worst part was, the Bailey era, where there's been sort of like the question marks around tanking. Probably that was my worst year, I reckon, into the first couple of years of Neildy, which was a real struggle. And I just felt like we sort of really lacked direction as a club. We lacked leadership at the top, and ultimately what where I feel real fortunate is that I've been able to see that total transformation and why we actually got it right. From the time that Peter Jackson started, we appointed Ruzi. We had a very clear plan. It was obvious from the top all the way down. We progressed into Goody becoming the succession, and there was a total commitment over a period of time where we built genuine foundations in terms of like, you know, what standards and behaviours are acceptable at the club. You know, what's our team ethos, our club ethos, what are our focuses, what are our priorities, and that filtered from the top all the way down to the footy department. Ultimately, you know, we wanted to be, you know, some of the key things where we wanted to become an elite professional football team, and winning was our focus kind of thing. And that was like, it's funny, but that's probably the first time I heard something like, you know, goals and aspirations like that from the club. It was like 10 years into my career. I was like, finally, we've got our focus right, you know. This is what we're here for. We're an elite professional footy team. That's what we're aiming to be. And throughout my journey up to that point, we heard a whole heap of different things, and you know, there's messages being sold to players that, you know, we've got a pretty good list, and we were lucky with the draft because we went through a period where we got early picks and stuff, and we'll be good when we get 100 games into our boys. But like, you're forgetting that you're setting them up by not teaching them the right way about it, you know, how to win, how to lose, how to respond, how to train, standards, behaviours. And that's got to be filtered through the whole club from the top down. And finally we got that right probably 5 or 6 years ago. And that's not to say there was lineal improvement all the way to the top. Like, Peter Jackson and Ruzi didn't come in and we didn't just get on a rocket and win. Like, you know, we went backwards, a couple of steps back in 19, couple of small steps forward in 20, and then we make a massive leap. We play in prelim in 18. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I feel grateful to have experienced that, because it's like, yeah, I think it'd be, well, to be honest, it'd be a pretty cushy ride, and I would have loved it had I been at Hawthorn, won 4 flags, but, you know, I think you got to look at it glass half full, and all of those experiences and opportunities and learnings I've had along my journey have probably shaped me into the person I am today. So, you know, I'm grateful for those chances.
And coming through, like, you've obviously, it's been an unbelievable roller coaster, and then to actually see the club, you know, become a great club, you know, a club that everyone, you know, wants to know what's the secret, what have you done differently. So it's nice that you've been able to, we were down, we're out. Like, this, you know, this is not the way that you run clubs. This is not the way that you try to improve and get yourself going. But to pop out the end, and that's sort of a very similar path to myself, is you come out the end and you see a well-drilled, well-organised, well-coached club. It's like, oh, where was this?
Exactly.
Where was this when we were sort of battling in the trenches? So that must be really nice to you, and even a lot of the players that I used to play with that were there when we did it really tough. I'd sort of, you know, the only thing I regret is they didn't get to see or be a part of something that was well drilled, well organised, and it just sort of was like a nice, like, well-oiled machine.
Yeah,
it just like, got humming along.
I compare the tough years to the last few, and as much as it might have been tough, like, personally, like, when you were playing and even just part of training and just being around the club, it's just a different vibe, a different energy. You know, it's just like, this is what it should be. You know, super professional, you know, most boxes being ticked, always aspiring to be better, you know, really clear and concise messaging. You know, there's an element of like a pretty, like, if you're in a highly stressed environment, which is when you're losing and struggling, and
even when you're winning, it's stressful.
Well, yeah, but it's like, it's not the same kind of thing, you know. There's an element of expectation, but like the amount of fun we had in the last year or two, even the hub year where we didn't quite make finals, but you could feel something was brewing, and like the amount of, you know, the fun and the energy that we had, you know, that's what footy is about. Like, but for most of my career, it was like hide away and like far out, here we go again kind of thing. Like, I still remember, we'd lose games, and I didn't want to get out of the car and pick up burgers from Grilled on the way home, and like didn't want to go to the pub.
Yeah, you get a Melbourne supporter, like you feel for the supporters too, because you know they're invested.
100%.
But it is. You feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
Even though you're like, well, I don't know what else we can do. We're trying.
Yeah.
We're just not capable.
We're not capable. Yeah, and so the difference in that is like, it's poles apart, but it's like it's a real rewarding feeling having lived both. And that's the one thing I've stressed to so many boys like that didn't get to experience what it's been like previously. Like, don't take it for granted. Like, every single day, keep striving to be better. And then you got guys like Track and Clayton. Like, look at the standard they're setting now. I only read some stuff the other day about Track training like a week or two after the granny. Like, that's exactly what you want from your leaders, because he's setting the standard now for Luke Jackson and Trent Rivers, and they'll be doing the same to the new draft picks that come in 3 or 4 years' time. And that's how you build like a sustainable culture that will be successful for a long period of time. Like, you look at teams like Hawthorn, Sydney, Geelong, West Coast to a certain degree. Like, how have they been so good and so strong for so long? It's because of the example and standards that their leaders of the club set. And I think now finally Melbourne's got that with Max and Track and the players I've mentioned, Steve May and Jake Lever, and these kind of guys that are just really setting the bar high. And they're not resting on their laurels, whether they win the flag or not this year. I know they're giving themselves every chance. You only have to go and talk to them and watch them train and watch the first scratch match. So yeah, which is a cool thing, because it's like you could easily and maybe in some capacity you could excuse them for just being so, just overwhelmed with having got the job done last year. But I think that's an example of where the culture's got to now, and hopefully that means for our fans in particular who have been long suffering, that means that they see a team and they're proud of the way they play for many, many years to come, not just sort of like in and out and then they're part of the despair again, which I can't see how it's possible that we'd ever be back there.
How great was 2018 for you and the team to get back to the finals? Obviously just one win away from making a grand final. All those years of hurt were finally coming out the other end.
Well, that was probably the funnest year I've had, I reckon. And it was a weird one too, because it's like I think publicly everyone was like, wow, where's this come from? And this great expectation. Whereas internally, like, for us, it sort of came out of nowhere. Like, I still remember that season. We got smashed by like 65 points, I reckon it was, at the G against Hawthorn. Goody gave us an almighty touch-up about our willingness to play for the team and play for each other and play our roles and all these kind of things. And I was thinking, man, we've still got such a way to go. But that was like line in the sand of that year. It was midway through the year after that Hawks loss, and we just really committed to executing our role, and that was it. And playing for the team and for each other. And we just got on a roll. And when you're on a roll like that with the momentum, it's like so much fun. Because it's like you're not really even trying. It's like you're just rocking up every week and you're just bringing some sort of energy knowing you're going to win. And that's what we did. And it was funny because it was like we were just ticking off. It was like all these outside opinions were, they haven't beaten a top 4 team and they haven't won this many in a row. And we just kept doing it. It was like 1 in a row, or like 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 5 in a row. And then we beat like 6th on the ladder. And then we go over to West Coast and we smack them over there. And we come back here and we play GWS at the G. And they're still saying, I'm not sure they'll get that done. We beat them too. And then we play a final. Jeez, it's big, a lot of pressure, beat them. Yeah, it was good fun. Until we ran into a brick wall when we went back to WA. But no, I think all those lessons, like, then people will say, like, what happened from 18 to 22 or 21? But for me, that's like just a sign of like maturity. Like, you think about all those boys that played in 18, Track, Harms, Oliver, these kind of guys. they're all 21, 22. And you fast forward 2 or 3 years, they're now 24 to 26. And all of those learnings and experiences that they've had along the way, one, to get to playing the prelim in 18, then for us to go through a pre-season where there's great expectation and we should bounce back to then having a really poor year. It's like dealing with that, another experience for them. Then they reverse that, have a really good pre-season. We start to really improve again as a team, but don't quite make finals. And then we spoke a lot about little things, and how that every little bit matters. And then we go away again, have a really strong pre-season, really, really refine everything and align everything. And then, with a bit of luck, some magic happened and we got the job done.
There was a lot of magic, and you've thrown a few names out there, and I'm like, you mentioned Luke Jackson. The first time I saw him play, I'm like, oh, hang on, how good's this guy? For a big guy.
You wait.
And now you got the Melbourne. Now you got the Melbourne hat off, and I know we all get carried away, but I'm like, Max Gawn's a star, and I love him. And he's a media star. I love Max Gawn, but I'm like, Luke Jackson. I think if he can keep going, he's going to have a better career.
Man,
am I crazy?
No, you're not.
He's a freak.
Freak.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm list manager at the club,
if he doesn't go back to Western Australia,
like he's, and he's a ripping kid. I love him, and he's like ultra talented. Like basketball background, but he's like an elite runner. But you should see him like at ground level is where he really shines. Like, and we worked a lot last year because he played predominantly as a sort of tall second ruck option. But it's like he was basically as small in the forward line. Like we were just getting him to bring the ball to ground, then get him on the ground kind of thing. And he chases and tackles and uses his big body to clear space and stuff. And you only have to watch the granny. Like he had such a great influence.
Oh, yeah.
When particularly when the game is on the line, and he just gives us such a change up. Like he's so different to the way Gawny plays, and that just allows us to really change the look of our forward line and change the look of our midfield. It's not, you're not carrying two massive giants in. Like he's essentially another mid, and he plays like that too. He's a special talent, real special.
Yeah, if I was Fremantle or West Coast, I'd be going so hard to get that kid back to Western Australia. And if I was Melbourne, I'd be like, hey, just
I've questioned him
a
on
way.
that. I said to him, I'm like, you won't go back home, surely. He goes, no, I won't. And I'm like, I'll hold you to that. Trust me. But he's like, no, I won't. I love it here. So we'll wait and see. And money will talk. Well, hopefully not in his case.
But he looks like he's having a great time, and he looks like he loves the Melbourne family. But and I always say Christian Petrarca. Everyone says Petrarca. We're all over the place all the time. But I got roasted. I think there was an article written last year where I said there was a block of games. I said, I think Christian Petrarca's gone past Dustin Martin in the last 5 or 6 games. And boy, did they come out of the woodwork and jump all over me. But he has. I don't know what it is, whether or not. The light bulb's gone on.
Yeah,
or
the
whether or not,
penny definitely.
Oh, has it? And because he's unstoppable.
Yeah.
Like one-on-one, it's a disaster for the opposition. And, even this year there was 2-3 opponents. It's quite incredible. And those guys are great to watch at training as well.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they make your training exciting.
It's so funny, like, thinking back to, like, where he's come from to where he is now. Like, rocks in, ultra-talented kid, very unsure of himself, lacks a fair bit of confidence, to then now, like, look at him. He's a genuine leader of our club. Like, the whole list would look up to him. And the amount of time and how dedicated and, I guess, just, like, how focused and how detailed he is with his prep, like, there's no reason why he's the best. Like, that's the reason why he's the best player in the comp. Like, he puts so much time in, and he's so committed. And the example I gave you before about him training, like, that's no joke. Like, he and the thing I think everyone loves about him is that he just loves the boys and he loves playing for his teammates. It's not about him, as much as it is about him, if that makes sense. Like he wants to be the best player, and he is our best player quite potentially. But ultimately, he's so willing and selfless to do his role for the team as well. And he along with probably there's a real nucleus of guys there now, but they all made genuine commitments to making a real shift. I even think back to like 18 and compare 18 Petrarca to now, and he's just come along in leaps and bounds as far as his willingness to play his role for the team and sacrifice and be selfless for the team to if he's getting tagged, just making some subtle shifts, whereas previously if he wasn't getting a kick, it was all about him and he'd just go into his shell and super quiet and give nothing, to now he comes out of himself and whether he's had 40 and kick 4 or he's had 20, you don't see any difference in him, and that's just the maturity of him, and that's the those guys have just learnt and they've learnt and emulated from people like me and Max and Tom McDonald and these more senior guys, Nev Jetta, that have come along and they've watched us and they've built their own sort of habits and behaviours, but at the same time he's got the mentality and the willingness to do that as well, and he puts in the work, and he's a special player, and I still think he's got another level or two to go to.
Gee, another level! Oh my goodness! Look out! That's scary. And what about you? So, like 300 games. When you think of, there's a very small percentage of players that play that long. So when you probably haven't reflected too much. As you said, you've tried to focus on
moving forward.
Yeah. Don't look in the rear vision mirror. Let's go. But 300 games of AFL football for a young kid who just wanted an opportunity to love the Saints. It must blow you away when you think of it like that. Yeah.
I think even more so that in the history of Melbourne, there's only been one other. And that's like, when I think about that, we're the oldest.
Who was that?
Nita.
Oh, Nita.
Yeah.
He was a gun.
Yeah. And the only, and then if you look at Melbourne as being one of the few, I think one of the oldest sporting clubs, not football clubs, sporting clubs in the world.
Was it 150 years or something?
Oh, more than that now. It'd be 180, I reckon, maybe.
Jeez.
I have to look that up. But, so that's a pretty big honour. I still would have loved it. The competitor in me is like, I would have loved to have played more. But, I'm pretty satisfied with my career, and I enjoyed that journey. But I think for me, it's just part of my mentality. It's like, now what's next? A bit like what we were saying before. Like, got other challenges, and there's heaps of good things going on in my life with family and new career path and all those kind of things. So it's like, on to the next thing kind of thing. I haven't really thought about it too much, but I will miss it. That's for sure. I've had a reality check in the last week or two. I finally got a proper job, and so I didn't do much. Like I said, I think I might have said it earlier at the start. Like once the season ended, I retired, and we had our twins, and I was like, I'm going to take 12 months off. I need to have a break. Like, I'm mentally cooked, and and then it got to like January. I'm like, I'm so bored. I'm like, I need to find something to do, and I wasn't really sure because I hadn't taken too much up. And then all of a sudden, a week or two ago, it all came in a rush. Some different footy opportunities within the media potentially, and do some stuff at my kids' school with footy. And then I got offered a job in a property development space, which that's something I'm really interested in. And I couldn't pass it up. So then all of a sudden I've gone from doing bugger all to just like, I've literally I get up from 5 till 7 and train for my Ironman.
Yep.
And then go to drop the kids at school, go to work from 8:30 to 5. I'm like, man, I don't know how people have done this. Like living a cushy life playing footy for 16 years, but no, it's been fun, and I'm excited about that next journey, next phase.
And training in the dark too, getting up and training in the dark. Football, we're so lucky. You run around the middle of the day, the sun's shining, mostly in Melbourne. You look around and you think, oh wow, this is my
I'll tell you
job.
what though, it's another world out there at 5 a.m. If you haven't, it's like
busy.
There's people everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of people like to get up early,
Bikes
and get
and
moving.
running, and I'm like, wow, didn't know this existed.
If you can get up, it's the best time of the day to be awake. Now, we've got to let you go in a sec because you're going to go do some real work, but I do need to ask you, what were you like watching the 2021 Grand Final? What was Nathan Jones as a spectator like, and did you have lots of emotions running through the body that night?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think.
Did you think you were going to win?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. During the game, I was a bit nervous, particularly when the Dogs got on a bit of a roll. But really, the grand final unfolded like practically every other game did for us that year. Like teams tested us right up to half time. It's like we sort of find our groove, and then all of a sudden, bang, we just pull it all together. But no, I had a whole heap of emotions. Like I would have been emergency for the game had I not left. I'd been emergency for 5 weeks, I think, leading up to all the finals and stuff. And with the limited opportunity due to COVID and VFL season being cancelled and stuff, like in the games that we did play, I probably played the best I'd played in a few years. And that came from Goody as well. Like he's like, I haven't seen you play or move like that for at least a couple of years. Which made it even more difficult to swallow because it was like I only needed a chance.
And do you know what? Deep down, I think football lovers, we were sort of hoping. Like you don't want.
Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird one for me, and that's part of the reason why I made the call, because ultimately with the granny, the only real chance for me to play was if someone then went down, and I was like, I'm not sticking around for that. Like I wouldn't wish that on anyone, kind of thing. And it's like I would stick around for 2 more weeks, miss the birth of my kids, and basically the only real chance of me playing is if someone breaks a leg, does a hammy, pops a shoulder. I'm like, I've got to go home, be with my family, and I'm real grateful that I did, and ultimately it turned out that way. Like the boys end up getting the job done, everyone gets through fit, and we win. I think I just had to swallow that pill and be like, that's part of the script for me. I could not, and I put hand on heart, couldn't have done any more. Gave myself every chance as far as like being fit and being in form. It's just the way it goes. Like it's just tough that's footy. Right place, right time. We had an unbelievably lucky year with injuries. And I'm on the cusp, like practically 23rd, 24th man for most of the year, really. And the rest is history. Like I said, it is what it is. I'm like not bitter about it. Would have loved to have gone the other way, but ultimately, in the end, it's just footy. And like I've said a few times, so many good things going on in my life. It's I'm not just going to pin my how I look at myself and those kind of things just to my career. I gave everything, put blood, sweat, and tears into it, and that's the journey that I went on, and that's the script that was written.
You're an absolute Melbourne legend. Thank you so much for having a chat today. Cannot wait to see you and 8 other Melbourne legends go out before round 1 to present that flag.
Oh, the Hawaiian Iron Man.
Absolutely superb.
The toughest in the world.
Maybe we'll see how we go, Chris.
I have no doubt you're going to
I want to. That's the ultimate goal. But I don't know if I can fit it in.
There's the headline. From the footy field to Hawaii. Jonesy, thanks so much for having a chat.
Fellas.
We love you. Well done for everything you did for that footy club.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations, mate. Great
Thanks,
career.
Croft.
Well done.